Hey guys, welcome to Raising Vibrations. You're with Simon today. And I'm sharing with you a video that I've promised you for quite some time. In some of my videos, I've also spoken about the information that exists within this specific archetype. And so today I'm going to go into it in a way that isn't too deep, because I feel like we do need to work with this material very slowly because it's very dense. So we're talking about the south node of Uranus, and the first opening the first opening video that I would want to use to start discussing this with you is collective displacement. Okay, and what's really interesting about the south node of Uranus and collective displacement is that all of us in some way, shape, or form have experienced this. Okay. And I feel that on some level, you'll be able to resonate with this. Now, let me just try and think of how I can actually introduce this in a way that gives us a centeredness. And then what I want to get across with this video series that I'll be sharing, and of course, this first video in itself, is to kind of captivate our imagination and also allow us to connect to parts of our psyche that carry with it elements of exactly that, like displacement, emotional displacement, feelings in which you don't feel like you belong here, feelings in which there's a sense of isolation or a sense of detachment. And because of the nature of Uranus in itself, there is a certain degree of trauma that naturally participates or is associated with these types of experiences. Okay, so we're going to work with the kind of the feeling within ourselves of past lifetimes in which we still have unresolved emotional patterns that we carry with us that need to be looked at, spoken about, and then healed through that experience. Okay, so the south node of Uranus sits in Sagittarius, okay? And it's roughly, I'll show you on a grid over here, where the actual placement is. Everybody, to a certain degree, will, in some way, shape, or form, have this really deep feeling of wanting to question where we come from. Why are we here? What is our purpose? What do we intend to do with this incarnation? And sometimes, how do we even see ourselves in contrast to the vast cosmos? And it's this kind of relationship that we develop with the cosmos in itself, or these deeper questions that would be underlined within the archetype of Sagittarius. Okay, so Uranus sits over there in Sag, and what it does is should I say the south node of Uranus, okay, sits in Sagittarius for all of us on the planet. And we all, in some way, shape, or form, carry with us this deeper inner need to know where, what, and why we are here, okay? And for us to expand our sense of consciousness regarding this experience, okay? Now, before maybe I jump onto the next slide and go into detail with it, what I do want to do is kind of explain what a planetary south node is. Okay. So firstly, have every one of you watched in some way, shape, or form a video on YouTube relating to the nodes of the moon, right? The south node of the moon, the north node of the moon, and that being in your own astrology chart in itself. So the same concept applies with planetary nodes, okay, than what applies with the south node of the moon and the north node of the moon. All right. And for anybody that hasn't actually got any of that information, I can suggest you a video that I created that's on this description, like in the description below, and you can check that out. Otherwise, go research a little bit about it, just to kind of give you sort of brief indication of how to actually translate this information that I'm sharing with you. Okay, so the south nodes and north nodes of planets themselves operate with the same dynamic. as the nodes of the moon. Okay, and the nodes of the moon themselves, in a very simple way, correlate to the experiences that have occurred, the south node, so what we already have experienced. In fact, up until this moment right now, you've experienced the south node of this video. Okay, when you reflect back upon what you've heard, you've experienced all the things that have happened since beginning this film or this video. So that would be the south node of the experience of this video. Does that make sense? So the north node would be the ongoing direction that you are experiencing as this video unfolds. Does that make sense? And then, of course, the moment between the south node and the north node is the exact moment. It's the exact, like, the middle ground, right? That's God. So what happens is we have this trinity, the south node of the moon itself, and the north node. Okay. So the same applies then with regards to planets, the past, the present, and the future. Okay. So let's look at, we're looking at Sagittarius at this stage. Pardon me, not Sagittarius, but Uranus. So we're looking at Uranus, which is situated there. Okay. And everybody, this is courtesy of the School of Evolutionary Astrology, by the way, taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green. This graph that you're seeing over here. So everybody on the planet, so the planetary nodes for everybody on the planet, Pluto between 19 degrees and 22 degrees Capricorn. And as we know, Pluto is actually at 17 degrees currently at this stage. So it's actually going to be going over its own south node very, very shortly. And of course, when Pluto was at 14 degrees, it was within about a 5-degree orb of the planetary south node of Pluto itself. So there's a whole entire video that I created specifically talking about that as well, which you can find in the description. Okay, so everybody also has the south node of Neptune between 10 and 14 degrees Aquarius. This is for everybody. And then, of course, the planet that we're actually talking about today, which is Uranus. So that is the 11 degrees over there and 17 degrees. Now, everybody knows that at the moment, Saturn, the current planet today, the Saturn itself, is at 16 degrees Sagittarius. And it will actually be moving all the way to 9 degrees Sagittarius in its retrograde, which will be taking place in April, if I'm not mistaken. Not April, March, actually. Okay, so everybody on the planet has Uranus at 11 to 17 degrees Sagittarius, roughly, okay? And everybody on the planet has the north node of Uranus between 17 and 11 and 17 degrees Gemini, okay? So we're following this, right? Okay? Now, what does this actually correlate to? Well, if the south node of Uranus sets in Sag, it would mean that the pre-existing nature of how Uranus operates as it is in this heavens today will be coming from that south node place, which means that all of us on the planet draw from the south node of Sag, okay, the south node of Uranus in Sag, and that every single one of us will be evolving that south node of Uranus in Sagittarius through our natal Uranuses, okay? So in my case, I actually have the south node of Uranus at 16 degrees Sagittarius. I also have the south node of my moon at 16 degrees Sagittarius. And I also have Jupiter and Uranus on the top of that south node. And I'll bring up my chart to show you. So there's a kind of general sort of theme regarding my own personal history, and that is closely attached to the planetary south node of Uranus. So I bring with me this like direct experience in my own life of what that means for me personally, okay? Now, what I was trying to say is that every single person will have the south node evolve, the natal Uranus evolve through its south node, okay? And I'll show you what that means when we get up the chart, because I know this can be a little bit confusing at this stage. And that will evolve through the north node, which means that everybody will have in some way a unique belief system or a sense of individuated belief system that is brought through south node in Sagittarius, and that we are learning to find uniqueness in diversity, right? To find wholeness, uniqueness in diversity. Diversity would be the Gemini thing, exposing ourselves to different types of belief systems and ideas and perspectives that allow us to understand the totality. That would be what that actual connection is about, okay? So has everybody got this here? The main intention just to give you that information. Okay. So you're now looking at an astrology chart that has the nodes themselves showing. Okay. So as you can see here, the south node of Uranus, I do apologize sincerely, the south node of Uranus in my chart lands at 12 degrees. Okay, there it is right there. All right. And the north node of Uranus sits at 15 degrees in my astrology chart. And you can see my north node is on the north node of Uranus, and my south node is just in a what, like within what, 4 degrees away from that south node there, right? So the reason why I opened up with collective displacement is because throughout my life, I've experienced the trauma, Uranus, okay, and detachment of growing up where I went to school 1 year younger or older than the group of people that I was in, okay? Which meant that whenever there was like any forms of activities, especially sports activities and stuff, I would always have to join the age group that was higher than me, and I would always have to leave my friends group that I was closely associated with, and have to join these people that I had no idea who they were. So already, 11th house, there is the sense of trauma and shock regarding being separated from my tribe. Okay, people that I know, people that I'm close to, that I have an emotional connection to, that make me feel safe. So on some level, a lot of the souls that actually carry Uranus and Sagittarius as an archetypal structure within themselves have got some form of collective displacement regarding the nature of living lives in which your own tribe or your family or your roots or your sense of life in nature has been basically removed in a very shocking way that has allowed you to find yourself in a different culture. Now, I want everybody to kind of just pause for a second there. Look at the way in which you have to experience your life if you were taken away from your home that you know right now and moved to a completely new home, like across the globe. Right, firstly, your sense of direction, Sagittarius, your sense of philosophy and personal cultural experience, Sag, would be removed, because now all of a sudden your sense of where do I belong, what do I believe in, what is my sense of safety, where is my home, all those types of things are now basically void. There's nothing there. You have to now integrate yourself into a new experience. That means that you actually have to start from zero again. And the reason why that's the case is because you don't have a support base, you don't have a friends base, you don't have a structured family that has their roots within the ground for you to aspire to be or to attach yourself to. So you're basically going to experience a lifetime of deep isolation. Also, part of that process would mean a detachment of how do I integrate myself and social expectations within regards to this situation, all right? And you can see just from this experience what type of emotional and psychological responses would naturally generate from this. That's just one. In 2005, I traveled to the UK from South Africa, and I spent 5 years over there where, again, my soul's need was to, and that was actually when Pluto was conjunct my south node. I actually traveled to the UK as Pluto conjuncted my south node. So this was interesting because it was the very thing for me moving from my own home country to another place that had a whole entire different evolutionary dynamic to it, okay, in every sense of the word. So already now I'm having to integrate into a new place, find new groups of people, new circumstances, new customs, etc., etc. So already there's this integration issue, right? If I had to now take it to the next level, in 2010, I moved to Sweden, and I found myself then in the exact same position again, where on one hand, I had to integrate myself into society that didn't speak my language as its natural language. Doesn't mean that nobody speaks English here, but as a natural language, which meant that my integration into any form of employment would be limited to my capacity to speak the language, which was obviously none at that stage. So again, the detachment and the disassociation, all the psychological experiences of having to go through that. Now you can imagine somebody that has like a Pluto conjunct the sun in the 10th house, there's so much about creative self-actualization. There's so much about empowering myself to go in that direction. And yet living in a country that had so much power over me reflected to me the nature of how suppressed and limited my potential would be, right? So the experience here is that on some deep level, all of us living in times that are, between 6,000 years in the past, have some way, shape, or form experienced a disassociation or a detachment or a displacement of your emotional reality from your tribe, and core philosophies and belief systems that will reflect to you somewhere in your chart. Now, in this case, the south node of Uranus sits in Sag in the 11th house. But my Uranus is already in the 11th house over there, so I'm really learning how to reintegrate myself back into the cultural definitions and societal structures. Whereas if your Uranus was maybe in the 2nd house, Pisces, it would mean that you were looking to reintegrate yourself back into the group dynamics relative to what your core sense of values were, what resources you had available to you. And then, of course, with Pisces there, on some level, that would be correlating to your relationship to transcendence. Okay, these words are very vague at this stage, I get it. But you understand the point I'm trying to make. And then, of course, the North Node would be there, right, in Gemini. So all of us on some level are learning the story around integrating ourselves and finding diversity. Okay, so as I traveled to the UK, as I traveled to Sweden, etc., and of course we have loads and loads of people on the planet today that have experienced the same thing. So I'm not highlighting mine as some special case. In fact, I've probably traveled a very little amount in terms of country hopping in comparison to many souls that have actually done astrology readings for. The point being here that it's the diversity and the openness and the cultural experiences that you get exposed to, Gemini North Node, that amplifies and increases your ability to understand the Uranus planet in your chart. So that's what I was trying to highlight through this slide over here. So the next thing that I wanted to show you that I felt was really, really important to know about why I would say collective displacement is because in some way, shape, or form, we carry this feeling of lost. I'm lost. Where do I belong? I can't find my tribe. Who believes what I have to say? I feel I'm isolated. And it goes on and goes on. And the reason why is because of the actual dynamics between Taurus and Cancer. So emotional stability is a manifestation from the archetype of Cancer in the birth chart in relationship to Taurus. Stability being one's feeling of resources and safety, one's safety coming from the Cancer archetype. So I need to feel emotionally nurtured and secure in relationship to how I can keep my basic psychological needs up. All right. So on that level, it's how do I sustain myself and how do I emotionally sustain myself? Those two things there. Security, right? We all have a sense of security that we attach ourselves to that gives us a sense of I'm grounded. Whereas if we just had no belief system or nothing of the sort, we'd be pretty abstract and find ourselves floating in the ether. So the groundedness regarding the whatever it is that we believe is connected to that angle. So Sag, as you can see, the Sagittarius, is what we value in its belief system. So for me, I feel emotionally stable and secure and safe in astrology because the belief system gives me something that I know is valuable, right? Just what I'm sharing with you right now, evolutionary astrology is a belief system that I use to explain the nature of reality from my perspective. So what it does is it gives me emotional stability to say, hey, I'm able to hold on to something here that gives me a sense of identity, Raising Vibrations astrology YouTube channel, and the safety, or should I say the resourcefulness, as well as the sense like physical security and the value that I have in it is there. So all of us carry within ourselves this core belief system that keeps us feeling safe and emotionally secure. So imagine if Uranus in the South Node over there correlates to lifetimes in which there's been a displacement regarding you being in a tribe or being part of something and then being kicked out or being thrown away or detached, or experiences being mass migration, etc. going on. You can understand the types of emotional trauma that we all carry on some deep level regarding where do I belong. Okay. So many people, like, say for instance, we look at New York, okay? And at some point, New York and Ireland had, I think it's the movie Gangs of New York. That's a great example of the collective displacement, where you've got literally the gangs within New York itself correlating to two different ethnic backgrounds and whose individuality will rule. Whereas if we look at it from the perspective of diversity, North Node Gemini, we can actually observe that there is this like land ownership that we're needing to work through regarding what is your belief, and how can we integrate and find commonality in the experience? How can we be open more to diversity? We see it all over the world with belief systems. We see it all over the world with crises that are occurring through what's the place in Syria, etc. And even in your hometown with certain people that have cognitive dissonance, where they refuse to accept the truth of something because it will shake their reality to the core. And a lot of people actually hold on to these things unconsciously because of those lifetimes of fear that are associated with loss. And the collective displacement that has occurred when all of a sudden the environment starts to act in a way that is not sort of safe for our living conditions, and we have to up and leave, as an example. Imagine if you took a polar bear and just stuffed it in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The experience would be incredibly hostile towards him, and so the same thing is for us. And that yod between Taurus, Sag, and Cancer reflects that. So this slide over here is pretty cool because I feel like it's really, really important to discuss regarding the nature of the current migration that has taken place. And this is what I wanted to talk about in relationship to Sagittarius and Saturn. You know, Saturn at the moment is actually moving into Sag, and it's been there for quite some time. But when I say moving into Sag, I really mean that as this new moon, the solar eclipse has taken place, and Mars is moving into Sag, the mutable cross is kicking in. So now we're dealing with Saturn and Sag stuff, right? So climate change, the issues regarding climate, etc., belief systems, and so on and so forth. But also on another level, migration. And how, I mean, even in Sweden, for example, you can just observe the migration from the other lands coming over here. And how are they going to integrate? How do they experience having to come over into another country that is completely foreign to their own ways and emotional securities? And how do they respond to life over here? How do people respond to them? And so on and so forth. So you can see that over the next 2.5 years with Saturn and its movement through Sagittarius, we're going to be dealing with all of these types of challenges regarding migration policy, asylum seekers, illegal immigration, etc. And how do we develop tools as a collective to be able to integrate and help people moving into situations in which their own trauma that they carry with them is really real, regarding having to leave their home because of man-made wars, etc. So, you know, this is a really, really cool mind map regarding how the Saturn and Sag transit over the South Node is bringing up all of these unresolved emotional stuff that we carry with us regarding how do we deal with these things? How do we deal with people coming into our place where they threaten our security because we don't understand what's going on, because we spend so much time not actually dealing with real stuff in the world. We deal with just, you know, spacing out on our apps and you know, smartphone TVs, etc. So all that type of nonsense. Whereas we're dealing with some really, really tough stuff here, and how this migration is taking place. It's food for thought that I'm trying to bring into our field of awareness and stuff. If you guys have got lots to say regarding this, please, you know, by all means, click in the comments below and write some stuff. I'd love to hear it, and other people that are obviously watching this video too. I felt that for the last slide that this would be something that would kind of cheer us up a bit of, and this is the kind of dynamic regarding the nature of Uranus and how patriarchy has created its borders to isolate people, and how the diversion between man and its fellow man has created these types of experiences. Like, this is an actual manifestation of Pluto in Capricorn, the south node of Pluto in Capricorn, the south node of Neptune in Aquarius, and the south node of Uranus in Sag, and how patriarchy has created these things. You are illegal, okay? No, I'm an immigrant in an irregular situation. What's the difference? Not having identification papers is not a crime. It's just brilliant, because it's like, we're all human, and yet what we've done is we've cloaked ourselves in these ego structures that basically causes these boundaries between us, and we don't see our own humanity. And it's the thin veil that just sits between that and actually realizing what's really going on that keeps us so damaged and distorted and detached, and that we don't actually find our tribe because we're so caught up in our own ignorant needs for holding on to our belief systems that we don't actually recognize what the actual truth is occurring over here. So some really powerful stuff, and I really hope that I stimulated food for thoughts in this experience. Thanks, guys, for allowing me to watch or to share this with you today, and I'll speak to you again later. Bye.